So my number two is a movie called The Firm from 1993, directed by Sidney Pollack, starring Tom Cruise, Gene Triplehorn, Gene Hackman. Uh, Quick log line from IMDb: a young lawyer joins a prestigious law firm only to discover that it has a sinister dark side. Also, based on John Grisham's novel, which I should mention. So I put this movie on my list because for me, this movie is about my fear of making the deal with the devil and you don't know that you're doing this. um, and I think it's a little bit about, people sort of saying who they are, but they're not really who they are. And that's a fear that I've sort of had from a childhood time. I remember, meeting people at sort of parties and such with my parents, to the point I have this vivid memory that I was home alone with my aunts and my parents were away somewhere, I think on a trip or something. And I think I was missing them or something. And I love my aunt very much, but I sort of looked at her at night and said that, are you my real aunt? Maybe you've been replaced by somebody else. So a very
Oh,
active imagination for a child. But I think on a serious note, this fear of mine of, are these people real? And am I making the deal with the devil really manifest itself for real for me in a work context? Because in a way, you are signing up to be with people in a pretty intimate way,
mm-hmm.
hand over your life, your livelihood, literally,
Mm-hmm.
to people that you don't really know much about. You just met them. You just spend like what 6 to 8 hours with them interviewing or what have you, and then suddenly this is where you're going to spend like half of your days, and they are going to be in charge of your success, your progress, your money. Like it's a lot, to kind of think about it. I mean, maybe I sound like a total freak right now, but it's if you think about it, it's pretty crazy. Like in real life, other relationships like our romantic relationships or our friendships, like they build over time. You get to know people over time. You're
Right.
not handing the keys to your home to them right off the bat. So I think this is why this sort of resonates. And then the other fears that come in the work context are, well, if I have lots of optionality, am I making the right choice? What if I make the wrong choice? And then if I do make the wrong choice, I hope I don't end up disappointing people who I care, and including myself. So I think it's sort of a domino effect that starts from there on out. And so, yeah, this is why this movie is very real for me for all of those themes. As a movie, like this is not a perfect movie. They're like giant plot holes and just things that just don't make any sense from a plot standpoint at all, but it's super entertaining, very, very rewatchable. In fact, the Rewatchable podcast did a podcast on this. I highly recommend that episode. But it's sort of, that time of movie making where you got ridiculous stars and you could paint a movie like this, which is sort of ridiculous from a plot standpoint on a super large scale, and you get the best talent there is for it behind and in front of the camera. And that's really why this movie is elevated. But there's a lot of genuine good stuff in it for sure. Like the sense of scale and place, we talk a lot about that in this play in our podcast. And I've never been to Memphis, and it sort of captures something different about a place. Like I think this movie is different if it's set in like a California
Yeah.
city or what have you. Like you really feel, and I think the score, the brilliant, beautiful cinematography, kind of really elevates all of that. I think we are meeting all these actors and actresses at sort of the peak of their powers. Like everybody it's like peak Cruise, peak Gene Triplehorn. Gene Hackman is always amazing. So, so everybody is amazing at what they're doing. And the sense of dread and fear pretty much sort of hangs throughout the entire movie. I think the
Mm-hmm.
middle part is a little bit saggy, but my favorite part actually is the first half when they are trying to make that choice. They're being wined and dined and seduced
Mm.
by this company and that place. Like I just love that whole piece. I mentioned Gene Hackman, who's amazing in this
Oh
movie.
yeah.
I'll give a quick shout out to Gene Triplehorn, who I always liked her, and watching this movie again for this podcast just reminded me she actually is a pretty interesting character. I mean, she made there's some plot hole questions like, why are you suddenly in the Cayman Islands doing
No.
whatever you're doing with Gene Hackman? Like that makes no sense. But apart from that, I think this character has actually a fair bit of agency, which I appreciated. Like she questions him. She's the one who's suspicious right from the get-go. She's a little bit of an audience surrogate. Like in my mind, I was like, oh, this was just a wife who just moved along because of the husband's job, which she does. But
Mhm.
in my head, I sort of had her as a lesser character. And I think even though on the page there's just a lot of problems with this whole arc of hers, I think she as an actress brings a lot to the movie. Like you see that this is an intelligent woman who, stands for herself a little bit. So I appreciated that. But yeah, it's a great watch. It's one of my favorite John Grisham movie adaptations, just because of everybody involved. Really, very entertaining. So yeah, that's my number two, The Firm.
Yeah, this is another movie I thought I'd seen. I thought I like that vague memory of seeing it, but after
Mhm.
watching it, I don't think I had seen this before. In terms
Huh.
of the fears part, and then I'll get into the film. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do think this definitely is, to me, viewed similarly, like the what is the cost of success? And that in this modern world where
Mm.
you want success through a job, if success is status in a career, and then obviously it comes along with it wealth, you have, like, what is the cost of that? What are you willing to sign away? And in this movie, to join the quote unquote firm, you do need to sign away a lot of your freedom, and then also your morality.
Yep.
Which, in modern, I mean, the whole idea of a workplace is you do sign away your freedom. You go to work and you're in a dictatorship. Your boss tells you what to do. You have no choice but to follow him or her, or else you're fired. You're executed. You're banished. So even when you're in a job, you are living in a dictatorship for 8 hours a day. You're hopefully not signing away your morality, but I think those are
I don't
things.
view it that way, but sure, yes.
Actually, that's, yeah. Anyway, but that some people are given the choice to potentially sign away their morality, and Tom
Yeah.
Cruise in this film is seduced a lot by that, and then at the end of the day, he realizes, no, this is gone. I cannot sacrifice this part of who I am, and then I must, fight back against the firm, which I definitely can relate to all those things, like you can, just in a modern workplace environment, and people focus on their careers. Like, these are decisions, I think, and choices that you're that are put in front of you, not to this extreme,
No,
not to this extreme.
and in a interesting way, like I think we make the choices that are heavily governed by where we stand and the demons we carry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's very on the nose in the movie that, oh, this is like a guy who didn't have a lot of money and
Exactly, yeah.
brother, and there's a lot of issues, not done very subtly, but I'm guessing that's just how the book is. But I think there is something real there. Like I can look back in my life and think about all the job choices I've made, decisions I've made. There's been something pretty deep that's powered those decisions. There's an
Mm-hmm.
intellectual component to that, but then there's also this sort of, subjective thing that's sort of deep under that you can't really put your finger on. And
Right.
hopefully, as you get older, you can recognize that more and more. So I think
Right.
I love that too about the movie.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Exactly. He's trying to like chase the ghosts of his father and his
Yeah,
unsuccessful, or not, I don't say unsuccessful, his poor upbringing, and that's
yeah.
what he's trying to replace by going to the firm, and all the
Hmm.
success, quote unquote success, that comes along with that. But it is at a cost. So I
And
do think
also
those are
family,
interesting
right?
things.
That's
Yeah.
what sells him. They say
Right.
that we are a family. He hasn't had one.
That's
His
true.
brother is in
Right.
jail, and
Right.
we have no clue about his mother, what have
Mm-hmm.
you. So it's money, but also that sense of belongingness.
Right, right. Which is another thing that, working in a job, they try to sell you that line too, like, oh,
Yeah.
you're a family, even though families can't fire people. So I always push back against that workplaces are not families. They're the exact opposite of that. But actually, in this movie, in a sense, it is a family because you can't leave. Which is
Yes.
true from your actual family. But yeah, in terms of the film itself, I mean, it's funny you were saying there wasn't much of a connection to the arachnophobia, but I actually think this movie
It probably
is
is.
very
Yeah.
much like it is. Such, I mean, this is the early '90s, but a total '90s cheese fest of a film,
Yeah.
like
It's an
absolutely
80s movie,
hilarious.
really.
It's so amazing. There were just like very overly melodramatic lines of dialogue that most of the cast, even though it's an incredibly stacked cast, like couldn't really pull off, except for Hackman. I think he could do anything. He's such a talented actor. Cruise, I feel like sometimes like, dude, you need another take on this. Like, I know it's the writing's fault, but you can try to elevate it a little bit. And man, just speaking of cast, there are two scenes that just like I had to almost pause the screen and be like, what's going on? The first scene is you have Jigsaw, who's the murderer from Saw, in a scene with Holly Hunter, Gary Busey, and Hank from Breaking Bad. I'm like, what is who is what? Why are all these people in the same scene? And then another scene, you have again Jigsaw from Saw, Tom Cruise, and the diabetes guy. In one scene. Like, this is the star power of this scene. I'm like, Jigsaw's talking to diabetes, and here's Tom Cruise. Like, I love movies like this where even the side characters are, you know, either they're going to be big stars like Jigsaw and then Hank, but just the cast is so deep. But again, amazing. I think that's something they used to do a lot in the 90s. They stack like all the way down to like the most minor character. You have like these great character actors that are playing all these roles. So that was so much like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so 90s.
Good and does elevate the movie, you know?
No, totally. You get Walter Brimley in anything.
Brimley, exactly.
Immediate, you know, you get that insulin shot of Walter Brimley and it's like, boom, you know, you got it. Yeah. I mean, in the film definitely was like kind of flabby, I would say. Like it probably deserved 30-40 minutes kind of cut out of it. There are definitely parts that it almost felt like they were looking at a book, which, you know, I've never read a Grisham novel, but it felt like they were adapting a book without trying to make it cinematic. It definitely felt like I was watching a book be kind of read to me and the way that the plot kind of like moved along. And I was like, oh, I've
heard that. Like it's very much, it follows that sort of pattern.
Yeah. So, you know, whatever. I mean, most adaptations I feel fall into that trap a lot. The other thing that I was most distracted to be that was the score. I just really, really didn't like, and it was shocked to find out it was Oscar nominated. I couldn't. Every 5 minutes, that little score had to come in and just be beating me over the head with how melodramatic stuff was. But, you know, similar to, there's another film we watched recently that, First Wives Club, I thought was one of the worst scores I'd ever heard. And that also was Oscar nominated. So something was going on in the 90s where like I was just not on the same page as the Academy when it came to scores. It's just really interesting.
I love both of these scores.
I know. Well, I mean, so does the Academy. They were both Oscar nominated. So I'm clearly in the minority, but like I was watching it and being like bothered as I was like, who scored this? And I looked it up on my phone. I was like, wait, what? Like, okay. And then I was like, Oscar nominated. What the? But anyway, it's a fun cheeseball 90s film for sure. Again, just watching it just for the scene where you get Saw and Holly Hunter and Gary Busey and Hank in one scene, like, you know, I can't slag the movie off too much for that. But it was a fun watch, I'll say. I think it fits more closely to like the tone of Arachnophobia than
you're
for
probably
sure.
Right. I was hesitating on that, but I think you're probably
it's fun.
Right.
I do think we need to do this B movie episode, though. I think this kind of fit into that in a way.
Not
too.
A B movie, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.